2013 Cadillac ATS. Front brake pads and rotors with brembo. First you want to do is jack it up and support it properly and remove your front tires. It's a 19 millimeter. Before you remove all your lug nuts, you might want to check your tie rod end. Grab the wheels at the 9 and 3 o'clock and push and pull. See if you get any play out of it. And do the same thing at 12 and 6. Push and pull, see if you get any play. If you get any play this way, you got a bad tie rod end or an inner tie rod end. If you get some play this way, up and down, it might be a wheel bearing. Or if you kind of grab it over here and do it at 4:30 and 10:30, you might be able to get some movement from that to the ball joint. Okay? Do that on both sides. That way you know if you got a bad suspension part before you take it apart. So you can fix that also. All right, first you want to remove the upper pin. And the pin is held in with a spring. Okay, so what you need is a punch. A long skinny punch to go through this hole. Okay, as soon as you punch this pin out up here, this pin's gonna get cockeyed like that from the spring. And what you need to do is push in on this part of it with a screwdriver and then take your punch and punch that pin the rest of the way out. And you gotta keep pushing on this spring to get this pin out. And notice how the spring has steps on it. Okay, so it has to get stepped through this spring. And when you get it all the way out, so when it sits in here, it's going to be all crooked. It's going to be tight. So you need to push the spring down to release the pressure on the pin. You get it out, and then it looks like this. And then you can take this spring, and you can hold it in there like that. So it's loose, okay? Then you can just go ahead and punch this one out, this pin out, and then you can hold on to the spring. Some of these you can get them out from underneath them. But there's a little clip holding it in there, so it can't come out. So we're gonna take this pin out. Okay, I punched this pin through here. There it is. And pull it out, okay? See that little clip in there? You get it out. If you want to know what holds this clip in there, this pin, there's this little spring right here on the end. It smooshes inside the hole. And then also the steps get stuck on the spring itself. Then what you want to do is get some screwdrivers in there and push the pad in towards the caliper. There's 2 pistons on the inside and there's 2 pistons on the outside. So you want to push the pad outward on the outer pad, and on the inner pad you want to push it inward. And once you get a little gap in there between the pad and the rotor, you can stick a screwdriver in there and do the same thing on the inside. And then push the pad outward and inward. And that way, both sets of pistons are pushed in. And then you can go ahead and remove your screwdrivers. Go ahead and remove your screwdrivers, and then you can pull out your pads. But you gotta make sure you push them pistons in equally, otherwise you won't be able to get a new set of pads in there. But if you're gonna replace the rotor, then we're gonna do that next. We're gonna take the caliper assembly off. Okay. So you can grab a hold of the pad, pull the pad out. If you're just gonna put pads in there, make sure you put some Seal Glide on the side of the pad so it can slide in and out of the caliper. Okay, got that one, and you got this one. All right, you remember, put the Seal Glide on that surface. These rotors are warped because the car has a brake pulsation when braking, so I got to replace the rotors. Okay, to remove the caliper itself, it's a 21 millimeter socket, and you want to remove 2 of these on the back side of the caliper. Okay, there's 2 of them. 21 millimeter. Once you get them out, then you can get your screwdriver in there and pry your caliper off, or it just comes right off pretty easy. And they're pretty light because they're aluminum. But these are 2-piece calipers, and they're held together by those Torx bolts. So you don't want to be taking those off. If you take them apart, then you'll end up with a leak. So if these are leaking in the middle, then they need to be replaced, okay? And what you want to do is you want to clean up your surfaces that the pad rides on right here where the rusty part is. And put some Sil-Glide on there so the new set of pads can slide on them nice and smoothly. Okay? Okay, the screw holding the rotor on is a T30. What you probably most want to do is get your propane torch or your MAP gas or even acetylene torch and heat it up. Heat it up so you can break it loose. Otherwise, you're going to break your tool off in there and you won't get it out easily. Me, I'm impatient. My tool broke off in there, so I tried getting a chisel to chisel it, and it won't turn. So now I'm gonna have to try to get it out. All right, I sliced it in half with a die grinder. Okay, sliced it in half. And then I hit the back side of the rotor a couple times, and I hit around the rotor, around the outside to make sure I break it loose from the hub. And it ended up cracking the head of the screw off. Okay. Okay, that's what the screw looks like. All right, the bolt. All right, I cannot turn it with vice grips. And that's what the hole looks like. Okay. Now all I'm gonna do is take my die grinder, and I'm just gonna cut it off flush and make sure it's nice and smooth and not sticking out. Okay, I cut it off nice and flush. All right, now we got that done. You see the hub? It's all rusty. You need to get all that rust off of there best you can without removing any metal, okay? Get your angle die grinder with a sandpaper disc on it and clean her up. Got some bad news. The hub bearing is too rusty. It's got high and low spots in it from the rust. So it's going to cause me not a true rotor. It's going to cause me a warped rotor. So I got to replace the hub bearing. It's too rusted, plus my studs are all halfway rusted out too. So if you can see, this stud is pretty rusted out. I cleaned it up. We got a high spot right here, low spot, high spot, low spot, low spot. Because it rides on the outer part and on the inner part. In the middle, it's lower. It's like a two-step. 1, 2, 1, 2. You know, it's got a step, and this is lower in the middle. So. And it's full of rust and it's sticking up. I try to clean it up. The more and more, it just removes more metal. Not a good hub. So we need to replace the hub. All right, you gotta bear with me now. If you just wanted to do just brakes, that's fine. You can fast forward it. But anyway, I'm gonna need to replace the hub. I mounted one bolt of my caliper in there just to get it out of my way so it doesn't plop around anywhere. Okay, you gotta remove the nut. It's a 36. Put that on there. Put some lube around your base of your hub bearing, some penetrant to let it sit while you're removing this nut. Remember, that's a 36 millimeter. All right, you got the nut off. Then what you want to do is you want to tap on the axle just to see if it's frozen in there. If you see it go in, you're fine. If it's not going in, then you're gonna have to put some penetrant around it, let it soak, and you're gonna eventually have to hit it pretty hard to get it go in there. You loosen it up. But if you do have to pound it through, try not to damage it or mushroom it too much. If you do mushroom it, then you have to get a die grinder in there. You have to, after you get the bearing off, you got to grind that off around the sides best you can. And make sure you feel it. Make sure it's not pushing out. And try starting your nut on there. And once you get the nut started, run it in and out a couple times to clean the threads up. But make sure you feel it to make sure it's not mushroomed out. All right. Okay, here's the 3 bolts that hold the hub bearing on to the knuckle. 13mm head. You need to break them loose with a breaker bar, with a 13mm 6-point, or even a ratchet, a long ratchet with a swivel head, or a ratchet with a cheater bar on the end of it. But you need to break them loose first, and then you can use an impact to get them out, okay? So once we got them all out, then we can tap on it and see if it comes out. Okay, we're separating. All right, you get some penetrant. Put it in there a little bit more. That's it. And work your way around that hub bearing and get it off. Careful that you don't cockeyed. You don't get this hub bearing cocked so you damage your ABS sensor. Okay? Be careful. Okay, I got the hub bearing out. It's all nasty. Now you see the black part of the hub right here. That's your ring, okay, for your ABS. And right inside here is the sensor right there. So if you're cleaning this up, which you need to do anyway, try not to hit that sensor. You can take the 10mm off and see if you can pull that sensor out, but most of the time they're all corroded in there and they won't come out. And if you take it off, you might be able to pry up against it to pry it out. And be careful not to break it. Okay? Just plastic. So it might break. But I tried cleaning these out and I ended up forgetting about it and I hit it and I damaged it. So I'm going to take it off and see if I can just pull it out. Okay, the sensor came out. I took the 10mm bolt out and then I grabbed hold of it and I turned it, wiggled it and twisted it, and it eventually came out. Okay, now all rusted. Looks pretty good. What you want to do is clean it up a little bit, put some anti-seize in there and on your bolt, and you go back together. And make sure you clean this up inside here and clean up the outer part of the knuckle right here where the hub bearing sits on. And as soon as we get the new hub bearing, we'll put it on there and we'll continue with our brakes. Once you got it all cleaned up, get an idea. Okay. All right, then you want to put some anti-seize in there on this surface and in here and on your splines, okay? Put some anti-seize on there and a little bit on your threads. And then when you go back together and you got it together, put some anti-seize on your sensor and then put that in. Okay, I got some anti-seize on it. Now I'm just waiting for my bearing. All right, I got my hub bearing. Remember to put that thing on there if you took it off. Okay, just kind of straighten it out a little bit. Grab your hub bearing. Put it up on there. And then line it up. Start all your bolts Okay, it's on there. Start all your bolts. Remember the 3 bolts with the 13mm heads. And on the driver's side, I replaced that one too, and that one had 15mm heads. So we'll get those started. It's 3 of them. And then we'll snug them up, and then we'll torque them. Okay, you got these 3 bolts started. Snug them up. And then you want to torque them to 103 foot-pounds, okay? After you got those torqued, and you want to get your sensor, put some anti-seize around this part of it, and stick it in there, and line up the hole for your bolt. And then put the bolt in and snug it up. Okay, you got your sensor in and your bolt on, you snugged it up. Now put your axle nut on and just snug it up. Don't tighten it up yet, just get it snugged up. We'll tighten it after we get the rotor on, okay? So now we're gonna take this caliper off. I got it on there with 1 bolt, but you can clean up your slides where your pads ride inside your caliper, and then put some Sil Glide on them, okay, on them slides. All right, I put some anti-seize on my hub. That helps prevent it from rusting up like the way it was on the original ones. So now get your new rotors and wash them with soap and water, or some degreaser, or some like glass cleaner, okay? Because you don't want to use brake clean on your rotors, because then that will get onto the new pads and contaminate them, okay? All right, got the rotors on. I washed it to get rid of that shipping oil that comes on them. And then I put the rotor on there, and I put some vice grips on there because I don't have those retainer bolts anymore. So I use the vice grips to hold it straight so I can put my caliper on. So now I'm gonna put my caliper on, and I'm gonna bolt it up. I'm gonna snug it up, and then I'll torque it. And don't forget to put some Sil Glide on them slides, okay? Okay, the caliper bolt torque is 111 foot-pounds plus 30 degrees. That's like a quarter of a turn, you know? That's like from here to there, quarter, okay? All right, 45-degree angle. 30 degrees, a little bit less than 45, so maybe an eighth of a turn, I'd say. Yeah, 111 and an eighth of a turn. Okay, it's probably from here to there. All right. But any question, just torque it to 130 foot-pounds. That's what I did. All right. Now it's time for your pads. All right, now you can put your pads in there. Make sure you put the pad material facing the rotor and the backing plate facing the pistons, okay? Clean up your pins and then put some anti-seize on them, okay? And stick it into the bottom. Find the hole, push it into the caliper, and just stick it in there a little bit. And we'll get the clip. Okay, push your pin into the other side of the other pad and then into the caliper. You'll see it sticking through there a little bit, and then it stops. And you just take a little ball peen and you hit this in. So it stops, and it looks like that. All right. And you want to get your other pin and start it in the hole, and then push that spring all the way down and push the pin all the way through the other side, through the other brake pad and into the caliper. As you're pushing down on the spring, use your other hand, hold your little ball peen hammer and tap it in, okay? And you might have to hit it at a different angle to get it to go in a little bit. Just keep an eye on it, don't be banging on it. You don't want to bend it, you don't want to break it, okay? You want to make sure it's going in there straight. And when it starts, then you can tap it in through the inside here to get that little retainer pushed inside the caliper. And now it looks good. All right, make sure you get these springs correctly. If those are facing inward, All right. So it looks like that, and it's all good. Now you need to get your torque wrench so you can torque your axle nut. And that torque is, what is that torque? 158 foot-pounds, 160 foot-pounds. Okay. Okay, you got your torque wrench on it, set at 160 foot-pounds. You put a screwdriver inside the fins of the rotor, and you wedge it up against the caliper, and that will hold the rotor so you can tighten it. All right. All right, so it's all set. Next you want to do is get a chisel, go over here to the notch on your axle shaft, and stake it. You hit the chisel with your hammer, boom. And you make an indentation inside of that little notch, and that helps keep it from turning. And that's it. So now you need to do is put your tires on and torque them to 100 foot-pounds, and then lower it to the ground, and then recheck your torque on your lug nuts. Go inside the vehicle, start it up, pump your brake pedal so you have a nice firm brake pedal. Make sure it doesn't go to the floor and keeps going to the floor, and make sure you pumps up and have a nice firm pedal before you go and put it in drive and reverse. So now that you got the pedals good, you can open up your hood and double check your brake fluid level and top it off if needed. And that's how you do your front brakes. And if I helped you out with the brake job or the hub bearing on this vehicle, I appreciate it if you subscribe to me. If you already subscribed, that's awesome. Thank you.